Hi, in this lesson you'll learn about variable scope and access. The scope of a variable is the region in which that variable can be accessed. Let's take a look at the rectangle class. This class has one class variable and two instance variables declared at the top of the class. Their scope extends from the opening class curly brace to the closing class curly brace. This means that all of the methods inside of the rectangle class have access to these variables. You can see this in the constructor, the getArea method, and the getArea formula method. In contrast to those instance and class variables, a local variable is a variable that is declared in the header or body of a block of code, which can be methods, constructors, and control structures. The scope of a local variable is the block of code in which it is declared. Have you encountered a cannot find symbol error while writing programs? This often means that part of your program is trying to access a variable outside of its scope. Let's walk through some examples to demonstrate local variable scope. This program has two methods, the main method and a getAverage method. Let's look at the first variable in the main method, num1. This variable is a local variable because it is declared in the body of a method code block. This means that its scope is the main method. Can you find the other local variables whose scope is the main method? The other local variables are num2 and average. Notice how the getAverage method can use the num1 and num2 variables as arguments because this method is called within num1 and num2's scope. What would happen if you tried to use the variables num1 and num2 inside the getAverage method instead of the parameters x and y? This would result in an error that says cannot find symbol because num1 and num2 do not exist outside of their main method scope. This is why parameters are so important. Parameters enable methods to get input from outside their scope. Let's move on to the getAverage method. Can you find any local variables here? If you identified the average variable, you are correct. The average variable is local to the getAverage method, so its scope is between this method's curly braces. Something else to point out here is that method parameters are also considered local variables because they are declared within the header of a code block. This means x and y are local variables whose scope is confined to the getAverage method. An important note about local variables is that you cannot declare local variables private or public. And this makes sense. Local variables are already confined to the block of code in which they are declared, so there is no need to declare their visibility as either private or public. All of this also applies to constructors as well. In this painting class, the constructor has two parameters, pcolor and pstyle. Because they are declared in the header of a block of code, they are local variables whose scope is the painting constructor. In addition to methods and constructors being blocks of code, control structures are blocks of code too. This means that any variable declared inside of a loop or conditional statement is a local variable. Let's take a look at this program that counts down from starting num to 0. What do you think is the scope of the variable starting num? It is a local variable to the main method, so its scope is the entire main method. This is why it can be accessed in the for loop header as the initial value for the variable I. Now let's look at the for loop. The for loop creates another block of code because it encloses code in braces. The for loop header declares the variable I as the loop control variable. This variable is considered a local variable to the for loop because it is declared in the header of the for loop. Therefore, the variable I can be used inside of the for loop body. However, if you try to access the variable I outside of the for loop, you get the cannot find symbol error. This is why you have to be very careful about where you declare variables when you use multiple control structures. One last note about local variables and scope. When a local variable and an instance variable have the same name, the local variable takes precedence over the instance variable. In other words, the value of the local variable is used instead of the instance variable because it has the more specific scope. Let's look at an example to see what this means. This program has a runner class with the main method and a calculator class. In the calculator class, there are two variables named number. One is an instance variable and the other is a local variable in the print number method. What do you think will print when the print number method is called, 0 or 10? When the print number method is called, the result of the print statement is 10. This is because the value of the local variable, whose value is 10, is used instead of the instance variable. Let's look at a second version of the same method. This time, number is a parameter instead of being declared inside of the method. How do you think this change will impact the program? What will happen when the print number method is called with an argument of 10? You will see the same output, 10. Why? The parameter is a local variable, so its value, 10, is used instead of the instance variable, 0. Now that you know about local variables in scope, it's your turn to explore this concept further.